Hi everybody, foXnoMad here, and today I want to help you travel smarter by explaining exactly how you should unblock your ears when they get clogged on a flight. Well, it won't be me explaining. I recently had Dr. Saba Gorab as a guest on the foXnoMad podcast. She's board certified and fellowship trained in otolaryngology, which is head and neck surgery, also known as ENT, ear, nose, and throat. I've written in the past what can go wrong when you try to unblock your ears by holding your nose and blowing, but I wanted an expert opinion to get the nuances and to find out what's the best way that you should be unclogging your ears after a flight. Dr. Gorab clears up a few things that I've gotten wrong in the past, plus shares some tips on how you can prepare your sinuses and your ears before your next flight. Oh, and her cat makes an appearance as well. Here's the clip from the foXnoMad podcast. What is that annoying sensation that we have in our ear, and why does it not go away immediately as soon as we're on the ground again?
So I guess to answer that question, I'm just going to start with describing the anatomy of our kind of ear, nose, and throat, just to help connect the dots. So essentially, we have our external ears, and then the ear canal, and then an eardrum. And then beyond the eardrum is what's called the middle ear space. Then beyond that, it's the inner ear. So then the middle ear space is connected to the back of our nose and throat via a tube called a eustachian tube. And this tube is a tube that is can be collapsed shut. It can open. It's very dynamic depending on what's happening in our atmospheric pressure. So when we are just day to day hanging out, in our eustachian tube's healthy, normal, we don't have any other diseases or sources of inflammation in the head and neck region, the eustachian tube will open and close. And what that'll do is it'll equalize the pressure in the middle ear space accordingly. So that's healthy, that's normal. What happens with flying, though, is as you know, the cabin pressure. I apologize, I have this very cute cat that wants to be part of this conversation. So what happens is when we fly, though, as you know, the plane is taking off and the cabin pressure will decrease.
I just wanted to cut in a second and talk about pressurization in airplane cabins. You might be thinking, hey, I thought airplane cabins were pressurized. And yes, they are pressurized, but to about 2,100 meters. So that means by the time you get to cruising altitude, it's like you've climbed up a mountain to 2,100 meters within a few minutes. Of course, depending on where you started out from, whether it's sea level, below sea level, or above sea level. But that's the reason for the pressure difference between what's in your ear and the surrounding cabin. Now, newer planes are pressurized to lower altitudes, and you might see in 10 or 20 years it being more comfortable to fly since the pressure in the plane might be closer to the pressure on the ground. But until that tech catches up, you're still going to have the difference between the pressure in your ear and the pressure around you. Okay, now back to the plane.
When the cabin pressure decreases, that middle ear space pressure is now higher than the cabin pressure. So what needs to happen is that eustachian tube needs to open and let some of the pressure out, and then we're again in equalization. Same with descension. So when we descend, there's a descent, then pressure in the cabin increases, so decreases in the middle ear space. Again, if that eustachian tube opens and lets that equalization happen, we're good. There are people who have just dysfunction of the eustachian tube, and this may be since they're a little kid. They just have a hard time opening and closing, or they have a source of inflammation in the nose, throat, ears that is ongoing. Most frequently, that you see this with folks who have seasonal allergies, or if they have a cold at that time, they may have a hard time opening and closing because that eustachian tube lining is very swollen and inflamed. So dysfunction happens because we can't equalize. When it doesn't work, the pressure equalization, you feel everything from a sense of fullness, clogged ears, feeling like you're underwater, pain, just a general, like almost it's disorienting because you feel like you can't hear as well and you just kind of feel off. And if you know that happens to you, there are a few things you can do, including treating, really, and if you know you have allergies or you know you have a cold, making sure you're treating it before you even get on that plane. If you don't have allergies and you're not sick and it still continues to happen to you, a few things you can do. The act of yawning or chewing gum is an easy one. Always, you're about to take off or land, start chewing gum. When you chew gum, when you yawn, when you eat, and all of those acts, it open and closes. It actually opens the eustachian tube. So that'll help you, just chewing gum. And then lastly, what I have my patients do is get a decongestant spray. You can take pills like Sudafed, but that tends to stay in your system and, make you not sleep well and so forth. So a spray just works just as well, but it's just local. So about 10, 15 minutes before you take off, a decongestant spray with phenylephrine or neosynephrine, like Afrin's a brand name people often know. You take that, squirt in each nostril, maybe 2-3 sprays each nostril about 10, 15 minutes before you take off. That'll help decongest all the tissues, including the opening of the eustachian tube all the way in the back of the nose. And so you have a better equalization. Same with landing, maybe 10, 15 minutes before you land, you do the same thing. So those are some treatment options that tend to work well.
Now, it's my understanding you don't want to force the issue. In other words, when you land, to hold your nose and just blow as hard as you can, which I see a lot of people, they get off a plane, they start doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really bad, or is that not recommended?
It actually is recommended. So and I'll just kind of go over what happens. So you take a breath in, pinch your nose and not let air out, and you close your mouth. But then you blow. So if you can't blow through the mouth or the nose, what you're going to do is you're going to blow through the eustachian tube. You're going to force it to open and then blow that air into the middle ear spaces. And that tends to happen. People tend to need to do that when they are landing, because as I mentioned, the cabin pressure is high, the middle ear pressure is low. So you need more air in there, and the eustachian tube has collapsed. So by doing pinching nose, closing mouth, blowing, you blow air into the middle ear space. Now, I say that with the caveat of there's always too much force that can be applied to really anything in life, right? So you do that. And if you try it and you can't pop your ears, it's not working, you got to stop. In a few minutes, try again. And so I tell folks, like, do it like 10 times, maybe every hour. If you have that sensation of clogged underwater feeling, keep doing it, 10 times an hour. And as time goes on, you start to equalize. But if you're blowing and you're like set on getting it fixed right away, you could theoretically overdo it, blow so much air that you rupture the eardrum on the other end. So if it's not working, just don't keep pushing it.
So what is then, if that doesn't work, it's been, let's say, an hour and your ear's still clogged, what would you recommend? Or is it a waiting game, or is there something you can do to help?
A little bit of both. There's definitely a waiting game. And then the measures I mentioned doing during the flight, you could continue, like chewing gum or yawning, because just again, that'll keep opening it. You can use that decongestant spray for several days before it becomes an issue, because ironically enough, those decongestant sprays can be addictive. And after a few days, you build tolerance, and then you need more and more of it. And then next thing you know, it does the opposite. Just like any other addiction, it doesn't work for you anymore. And then you get more congested and then use more of it. So it could be a slippery road. But if you use it for 2-3 days at a time, you're not going to run into that issue. So you can continue to use the decongestant spray in the hours to days after a flight or air travel. You could do it every couple hours, twice a day, however you like, to just keep the inflammation low if there is any. And that should help. And you can continue to try popping ears every, say 5 to 10 times an hour until you start to have relief and you feel better.
This was just a clip from my full conversation with Dr. Gorab, so I'll leave a link to the full episode of the foXnoMad podcast down in the description. Dr. Gorab and I get into all sorts of things related to your ear, land sickness, seasickness. I think you'll enjoy the conversation, so be sure to check it out at the link below. Thank you, Dr. Gorab, for sharing your expertise, and thank you for listening and watching. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. I'll have new videos for you every week, and I'll see you in the next video.